Every family has its differences, and outsiders never truly know what happens behind closed doors. But not many of us can say we know someone who would knowingly hurt their loved ones. That was how the town of Griekwastad saw the Steenkamps, a normal family with normal kids that never did anything controversial or caused a stir in their farming community. That was until the evening of April 6, 2012. While everyone else was celebrating Good Friday, Don Steenkamp was speeding to the town's police station, covered in blood, to report the annihilation of his parents and sister. Griekwastad isn't known for a high crime rate, unlike other areas of South Africa, such as Johannesburg. Most of the news and disputes revolve around farming and trading, which is what the town is primarily known for. However, as many of the farmers in the area are wealthy, it isn't unheard of for farm burglaries to take place every now and then. That's what the police thought this was when they attended the scene at Naufuk Farm. What they discovered was much worse than what they'd imagined. Of the 4 Steenkamp family members, the only survivor was Don, the only son and eldest child. Among the victims were his mom, Christelle, his dad, Dion, and his younger sister, Marthella, who died from gunshot wounds. The crime scene told a story worse than that of a simple burglary gone wrong. Each family member had been hit multiple times, some of the bullets hitting them even after they were dead. There was blood all over the house, showing the trail that Marthella had taken trying to escape her executioner. The house phone was still hanging out of the receiver, where she'd try to call for help. 15-year-old Don told the police he managed to survive the ordeal by hiding in the barn on his family's property. From there, he heard sounds of his family dying and waited until there was silence in the house before investigating. Marthella was reportedly still alive when he entered the house, and he held her in his arms as she slipped away. It was after that Don raced to the police station in his dad's car, and the wildest investigation into Griekwastad's history began. It was clear from the get-go this was no burglary. In a typical farm burglary, the assailant would go for anything they could find: money, jewelry, even vehicles. It was even common for them to poison any dogs on the farm so that they couldn't alert their owners to the presence of an intruder. But none of that was the case here. In fact, in the very room the family was found, Christelle's purse was left on a table and all of her money was still in there. Even the family's safe, which contained thousands of rand, was untouched. Even stranger, the firearms used against the family were left at a gate on the farm. A lot of criminals are pretty stupid, but who's dumb enough to leave such a crucial piece of evidence behind? As the investigation was underway, the friends and family of the Steenkamps were grieving their loss and figuring out what to do with Don, who was still a teen himself and definitely couldn't be left to his own devices. He was sent to temporarily stay with his dad's longtime friend and fellow farmer, Andreas, until he could return to his boarding school in Bloemfontein. But already, rumors were circulating about what happened to cause the deaths of this family. Some believed that Dion had ended the lives of his wife and daughter before turning the gun on himself, leaving Don alive to carry on the family farming business. Some believed that Marthella was behind the slaying, and it was somehow connected to devil worship. Another theory was that Don was adopted and he'd been told that earlier in the day, which sent him into a frenzy. It's difficult to say if anyone actually took these rumors seriously, but what they didn't realize is they were on the right track. As the investigation continued, a disturbing piece of information was discovered by the pathologist who did Marthella's autopsy. Within the 24 window before she died, Marthella was violated. This was horrible, heartbreaking news for the Steenkamps' relatives, who now had to live with the image of what Marthella's final hours must have been like: painful and terrifying. It was around this time that the police started focusing on a suspect as well: Don. Since the deaths of his entire family, he'd been playing it cool, to say the least. He regularly asked questions about what he had to do to inherit his parents' R23 million estate and bragged about how well he drove his dad's car to the police station that night. His teachers were becoming concerned. For someone who is known as a quiet boy, Don had become loud and arrogant since returning to class. He seemed to thrive off the attention he was getting from his classmates now, especially the girls. The deeper they looked into the case, the more evidence seemed to point towards Don, including a text conversation he had with a friend the morning after that fateful night. The friend asked asked if there were any suspects, and Don told him he knew that he was the only suspect. He also told his friends that there were no other fingerprints at the crime scene besides his own. But there was one message that truly concerned the police. "Friend, is there no evidence to find someone else?" Don: "No, they're not going to find anyone else." What made him so certain there was no evidence of another perpetrator at the scene? Surely you'd hope there would be if you were telling the whole world it had nothing to do with you. Nothing about this case sat right with the authorities, who made the decision to arrest Don for taking the lives of his family and violating Marthella. He was taken into custody on August 21st, months after the crime took place at his school. However, Don was somehow granted bail and released back into the custody of a friend who would watch over him for the next couple of years before his trial. In that time, he took part in motorsport tournaments and was seen practicing his riding skills on Marthella's horse. It was like he was totally unaware of what he was being charged with. Despite the severity of his supposed crimes, Don's family stood by him throughout the trial and even after that. His grandmother especially remained close to him, attending every court appearance for months and proclaiming over and over again that she believed her grandson to be innocent. But as the trial went underway, it became clear pretty quickly that the police knew more than they'd let on, and the case against Don wasn't looking good. They analyzed every move he made since his family died, how he managed to turn on the tears in court and at their funeral, but in public he seemed calm and even happy. At this time, many journalists described him as emotionless, as the prosecution described evidence against him, which caused the public to speculate whether Don could be a psychopath. He spent many hours being assessed by Dr. Larissa Panini-Peter, a specialist psychologist who worked with Don to see if his psychological well-being could have caused him to commit such an awful crime. Many family and friends knew that Dion could be a strict dad, but no one had ever heard him get overly angry at his kids or use corporal punishment against them. However, when Don was much younger, a teacher in his school was arrested for violating male students. Reportedly, his parents weren't concerned that Don could have been targeted, as he was much younger than the victims, and Don had always denied anything happened to him when he was younger. No full investigation was ever carried out against these suspicions. With no reason to believe Don committed his crime due to his mental well-being, the prosecution turned their attention to what motives he could have had. The first was money. The Steenkamps owned multiple farms, as well as livestock, and had lived comfortably their whole lives. Don's estimated inheritance of R23M is over $1 million, and Lord only knows what a teenage boy hoped to do with that kind of cash. It'd been made pretty clear to both Don and Marthella what they both stood to inherit if anything happened to their parents. Marthella would have inherited her mom's jewelry, cattle, and the farm they lived in. By getting rid of her, Don had increased his own inheritance by at least $7.4 million. Another motive was that Don was found to be responsible for the violations against Marthella. If it had taken place recently, he could have taken the lives of his family to silence them and stop them from spreading this information. Both of these motives made sense to the prosecution, along with the fact that it just didn't make sense why Don was able to survive what happened. The judge in trial, Franz Kagomo, made it pretty clear to Don that he thought his story about what happened that night was totally bogus. He's a cruel, cold-blooded killer, and he apparently allowed you to move around at the scene. Do you realize how that sounds? Don was criticized for not calling the police and attempting to perform CPR on his family, even though he felt comfortable enough to enter the house, even after hearing the shots. The prosecution also mentioned how strange it was that Don had so much knowledge of the crime scene, even though he claimed to have left for the police station as soon as his sister had died. He knew how many times they'd been hit, where they were hit, how the perpetrator had access to the house. This was knowledge only the killer would have. With all of the evidence in mind, Don was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years behind bars. Because of his age, he was sent to the juvenile section of Kimberly Prison, where he will stay until he turns 21, where he'll be moved in the grown-up population. This also would have been the age he'd stand to inherit his parents' fortune. Although the rest of his extended family is split on whether they believe Don is guilty or innocent, Don will be nearly 40 years old when he is free. Betty has forgiven him, but is vocal about the fact that she believes her grandson needs psychiatric help so he can contribute to society when he's released. Hopefully, when that time comes around, allowing him back into the world won't be a risk to the innocent people around him. That brings us to the end of today's video. What do you think of this case? Why do you think Don did this? As always, I can't wait to see what you guys think down in the comments.